Hi, it's Noorhasan, and we're back at the Modern Parenthood podcast. And I'm delighted to have today Sarah Peacock with us. June is Pride Month, and she is going to share her story of fertility and her journeys to have her two babies. So, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
This podcast is meant to provide information on reproductive health. It does not establish a physician-patient relationship, and we would urge you to contact your treating provider regarding your care.
It is such a delight to have you here. You have such an amazing story, and I would love for you to share your story with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am living in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been in the music business for about 23 years, give or take some change. And I have two beautiful daughters, thanks to you. And life is awesome. I'm taking some turns, but we're pivoting and we're rolling with it. And honestly, yeah, that's I'm from Georgia originally, so but yeah, that's the elevator pitch to a little bit about me.
Well, wonderful. Tell us what led you to your journey to have your first child.
Yeah, so I think in order for me to really before we dive into the fertility stuff and to wanting to be a parent, I think like some context would be important, especially for my story since I'm part of the LGBTQ community. So I'll back up just a little bit and kind of like we're going to zoom into like my childhood and sort of some of the messaging and narratives around that. And I grew up in the South, so super conservative Southern Baptist, family. And so a lot of the messaging and narratives, like within that culture and that time and space, especially like in the early 90s, it's a lot of like, the tapes that play in my head are just that, queer people don't deserve to have families. Gay adoption was starting to become like a topic of conversation in the religious community. And just, I remember hearing that and not really knowing at the time. I knew I was different, but I just like the messaging for me just didn't feel inclusive. It felt very alienating. And so as I'm kind of taking in a lot of this as a young kid growing up in the South, and hearing that, I think as I became an adult and learned how to kind of reconcile my faith and my identity, and kind of coming full circle now, they call it like deconstruction or whatever. And like, I think just that messaging in general, like it was all the more like important. And like, there's just sort of this deep longing for equality in my spirit, and feeling this just the deep desire to just be able to become a parent and to become a mother and to have children, as an LGBTQ person, having overcome what some of that messaging did to me as a young preteen and young adult. It was just all that more meaningful and important for me to just to choose that path, and to become a parent. So
Yeah, love is love, and parenthood should be a possibility for everyone. So, how did you get started on that first journey?
yeah, so I was married at the time, and we were starting to talk about wanting to have a family. I was about 36, I think. 36 maybe. Yeah, about 36. And we tried many different ways, all the different ways that you could possibly try to conceive. We tried at home. We also went to see several doctors here in Nashville, did about 3 rounds of IUI, and nothing was working. And I sort of, the last failed pregnancy test with the IUI, the doctor said, if you're going to have success, you're probably going to want to try IVF. You're going to need to, pull out the big guns and just go IVF all the way. And so it was, at the time, the pandemic, and most of us musicians were not working. And so I had found myself with a lot of time on my hands and decided that I would look into companies that provided IVF insurance. So I went to work at Starbucks for a couple of months, got the insurance through there, and we were able to do several rounds of IVF with you, Dr. Noorhasan, and we did the reciprocal cycle IVF, and several failed transfers, but eventually got my daughter Willow.
For our listeners out there, I want to tell you about reciprocal IVF. So reciprocal IVF is when one partner undergoes the IVF process, so the injections where we retrieve that person's eggs, and then the other partner, we transfer the embryo to that person's uterus. And you have Willow now, which is amazing.
Yeah, she's amazing. I'm just, when the moment that I held her for the first time, it felt like all of those deep longings, those questions that, because there was such a struggle, it was nearly 5 years of struggling with infertility to have her. From the time we started trying when I was 36, nearly 36, to the time that I was 40 when I gave birth to her, it just felt like this just explosive amount of love and gratitude. And it was overwhelming.
The fertility journey, it seems like this giant mountain, and you don't even know where to start, which path to take. Is there a longer or shorter path? And then sometimes up that mountain, you have to stop and take breaks because you're exhausted, you're tired, and you don't know if you will ever make it to the top of that mountain. But when you hold that child, when that child's finally born and you're at the top of the mountain, it's amazing. And I'm so grateful for you for sharing your story. And if there's anything you would like to leave our listeners with, a last word of advice, any tips for our listeners out there, we would love to hear your advice.
I think sometimes when I look back on my journey of IVF, and the fertility journey, or the infertility journey, as an LGBTQ person, I think I just sort of assumed, right, that the only reason I would need fertility treatments was because there was a lack of sperm, and that was the only component that I needed, that was missing for me to become a mother. And then getting into it and realizing that there were some other things, just kind of exacerbated the emotional roller coaster, right? And I sometimes look back on it and I go, man, I wish I hadn't wasted so much time and money on trying all these different things. I was, I think, 36 at the time. I was sometimes I wonder, I wonder if we had just gone to IVF right away, if I would have, that biological component, or this or that, or I wonder if I hadn't done, this or that in my past, would I have had better egg quality, or did I do something that, that maybe messed with my fertility? Is it my fault or whatever? And I think about all the variables, right? But then I think if I had a different outcome, I wouldn't have the Willow that I have, right? I wouldn't have the Luna that I have. And I just think it's perfect, just the way it is. Even though the journey was what it was, and it was longer than I wanted or expected it to be, I have the two most beautiful, perfect children that I was meant to have. And I think if I were to leave your listeners with something, it would just be to remember that if you are stuck in the middle of grief and lab work, you know, it's not a fun place to be. It's very difficult, but just try to remember that, and I know it sounds trite, but it is true, that whatever child you are meant to have, whatever baby you are meant to hold or to carry, is the one that you're meant to carry. And so it all kind of boils down to, you know, trusting the process. And it's a very hard thing to do, but I've got my Willow and I've got my Luna, and I'm so glad that I trusted the process. And I trusted you, Dr. Noorhasan. It was not easy to trust you, despite how wonderfully amazing you are, coming from several other experiences here in Tennessee, where I was working with doctors. I was like, oh, you know, but I trust you with my life. You figured it out. You did it, and thank you. And so, yeah, keep the faith, people. And go see Dr. Noorhasan for all your fertility treatments, because she's not only making miracle babies, she's a miracle worker. So thank you.
Oh, Sarah, you're absolutely welcome. But thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your experience with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing your story. And it's so important that other members of the LGBTQIA plus population hear your story, because your story is so inspirational. And I want everyone out there to know that parenthood is a real possibility and love is love. And so I'm so grateful for you for sharing your story today as part of Pride Month. If you like stories like this and you want to learn all things fertility, please like, follow, and subscribe Modern Parenthood Podcast.
Pioneer.